Welcome to Podcast, the Business of Dentistry podcast, brought to you by Practice Plan. Podcast delivers the best business advice, real-life stories, and practical hints and tips to make your practice a more profitable and sustainable business. And now, here's your host.
Well, hello, my name is Nigel Jones. I'm one of the directors of the Practice Plan group of companies, and this is a regular podcast that I've begun in recent times called In the Loop, where I like to speak to people with expertise, knowledge, understanding of our dental world, and try and tap into all of that knowledge to provide useful information for practice owners and aspiring practice owners and associates, and pretty much anyone that's involved in the dental industry, really. And I'm absolutely delighted today that I've been joined by Andy Acton. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Nigel. How are you? You well? You looking well?
Thank you very much. Likewise. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. I'm good. It's the start of a new year. There's grounds for optimism about the future, particularly in the world of private dentistry. But yeah, I'm good. But you know, Andy, you'll be very familiar to a lot of people. But then equally, there might be some that with whom your path has yet to cross. So I wondered if you wouldn't mind just introducing a bit about yourself and your background and your involvement in the dental world.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Andy Acton. I'm one of the directors and owners of the Frank Taylor Associates Group. And so Frank Taylor Associates is a business that actually harks back to 1988, 37 years old. And we value and sell dental practices. But then related to that, we also have a commercial finance arm, FTA Finance, which quite naturally fits because if you're buying a practice, you most likely need to arrange finance. So we do that. And then attached to that, we have FTA Wealth that will deal with the insurances relating to the finance, but also pensions and investments of people who are have surplus cash or have sold their practice. And then the last piece of the jigsaw, we have FTA Media, which produces all our own digital content. So all the seminars and webinars, the podcasts that we do, they do that. We also provide videography and social media services to dentists. So I sort of like to think my umbrella is the business of dentistry.
Yes, well, it's precisely that umbrella that I'd like to sort of tap into over the next like 10-15 minutes or so, really, because I know we'll have other opportunities to talk to you and your colleagues about the sort of core activity of Frank Taylor Associates. But I'm interested in picking your brains a little bit about what you've observed and what you've learned about the challenges of running and owning a dental practice, which will have changed a lot during your time at FTA, I'm absolutely sure. But I just want to, how do you see things currently?
I think the major challenge that independent practice owners have is they're not equipped, skilled and trained for the largest part of being in business that kind of leads to success or otherwise. And what I mean by that is that when you're at dental school, you spend all of your time developing your clinical skills. And from a patient perspective, that's really important. I get that. However, whether you're an associate or a practice owner, you're in business. So to not have some bare fundamentals in terms of the structure of business and the core skills you need is problematic. And for an independent practice owner, things are getting harder. There's more competition out there. Practice owners would have seen their costs rise because of inflation over the past few years. Interest rates are higher than they have been. We had the recruitment issues coming out of the back of COVID. So it's not a walk in the park. It's not easy. And all of that responsibility is shouldered by the practice owner. And remember that lots of those things that I've described, managing people, sales and marketing, developing a strategy, they're not core skills that a dental practice owner has, because their default setting is to deliver dentistry. That's kind of what they're there for. And what I see happening, and I've kind of dubbed this term owner fatigue, is that practice owners tend to kind of jog on for 10 to 12 years. And then suddenly there's just this kind of sense of being fed up with everything. And the shame is it's rarely the clinical dentistry they're fed up with. It's everything else. And I don't believe that needs to be the way. I think with some support on the business side of dentistry, it could be a more enjoyable and fulfilling process.
Yeah, that makes loads of sense. And during the course of my career, I think I've seen a lot of that owner fatigue that you've just referenced. And I think it's a shame, partly because I can see particularly in the coming years at the moment anyway, a lot of opportunity for people. And I think there are quite a few that are just too tired to be able to tap into that opportunity. And actually the opportunity point's interesting, because I think that sort of jogging along point that you made, it seems to me that there comes a point in a lot of people's career where actually what they're focused on is their exit. They're just when they can leave the profession, and how do they maximize the value of their practice at the time they reach that particular point. And yet I've heard you say before, that makes for quite a tricky time in the run up to that.
It does, and in some ways I completely understand when you're in that window of selling, which people should be considering this 2 to 3 years out, because then you can perhaps make some subtle adjustments to your business and really get it in good shape for sale. But equally, if you're going to be owning a dental practice for 10 to 12 years, how about the thought that says, why don't I optimize my business as early as possible and get it in good shape for sale? Selling and having your business in good shape for sale are two completely different things. They're disconnected. When you get towards the end of your career, they're going to connect. But having a business that's in great shape, isn't overly reliant on you, will mean that you will have arguably a more fulfilling ownership through those 10 to 12 years. It will definitely make it easier for somebody to take that business over. It will most likely mean you have a more profitable business. But also importantly, sometimes we hit speed bumps in our lives and things change at short notice. If your business is designed for sale now and something did come at you which you weren't expected, that's not a big drama. You can deal with it, you can cope, you can exit the business. If it is so reliant on you from a clinical point of view, from a business management point of view, and then something happens, you're most likely in a stress position because this thing that's come on you probably wasn't planned. And then you've got to get your business in shape to sell it. So I'm a massive advocate of helping people get to a stage where they design their business for sale. They might own it for another 3, 5, 7 years, but it's optimized for sale. And then selling becomes way easier.
Yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense, rather than trying to scrabble around, plug the gaps without sufficient time to bed all of that in. That makes lots of sense. And I guess with the kind of experience that you have and the kind of role that you've played with FTA, you probably have a perspective and get insights into practices, but just by virtue of having to try and value them and look at how optimized or not they are. So what sort of level of experience? I don't quite know what sort of would be typical for the number of practices that you would have seen or see in a typical year.
So as a team, we'd probably visit somewhere between 450 and 550 practices a year. So we get to see a lot. We get to see kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And for me, what an optimized practice looks like is a good, stable team. So where people are in the right job, they have the right skills to do that job, and they have the right support. If you get a good team in place, everything just seems to get a bit easier. Regardless of what business you're in, we are all in the people business. And getting good people, getting them aligned with their work so they enjoy what they're doing is a massive win. And the sooner you can get that in place, the better. I also think for practice owners, something that they don't necessarily always appreciate early on, but it's a bit of a dripping tap, is it's quite a lonely place. Most dental practices in this country are owned by solo principals, solopreneurs, and there aren't that many people you can get to talk to. You don't want to go home and be moaning to your husband or your wife or your partner about your day because you want a life away from the practice. So trying to build a network and some mentors around that you can talk to, that empathize and understand your situation, I think that can be really helpful. And I think it can de-stress and depressurize a situation because you're able to talk to people in a similar situation to you. Something else that I see in really good practices is where the principal delegates everything. They're always looking to delegate. They're looking to do less and less, and not in an abdication way. They're not just kind of abdicating responsibility. They're empowering people to do more and more in their practice. But again, coming back to this, it's optimized and it's easy to pass to somebody else. If it's not really dependent on me, then actually I can step away from that business and somebody else would come in, which means from a transition point of view of selling, it's way easier. And then the last part is to loop back to what I said before, which is start thinking about your exit today. even if you've literally just got the keys, start thinking about it. Because if you start with that train of thought, you're not going to have a business that's reliant on you. You're not going to have all the responsibility, because that will involve delegating, and you're not going to take on the stress. And it may well be that you enjoy those last few years of your career of ownership, as opposed to owner fatigue setting in and you're selling because you're fed up, which I think is always a shame.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And you so much over the last few years, particularly post-COVID, you hear the word burnout associated with practice owners, and
Yeah.
and that doesn't feel like it's teeing you up for an enjoyable retirement. So even if you achieve your financial objectives, are you in a fit state to really benefit from all your hard work? So I think it makes perfect sense that you've got to enjoy the journey to that point, and not just be so obsessed with it that you don't. But I also wonder, when people are selling because they're so fed up, that's potentially when moving towards a corporate becomes an easier option. And I sense sometimes there's a bit of reluctance to that, and that people would rather keep their practices independent and thriving. And certainly that's what I'd like to see. Two markets side by side. There's obviously a place for the big dental change and the smaller dental groups, but also a thriving independently owned sector. And I do worry sometimes if that owner fatigue is off-putting for aspiring practice owners, and where they get their motivation and inspiration from.
I think we all live our lives through our own eyes, and I think any of us that have been doing anything for 10, 12, 15 years, we just see the world differently than young people. I think back to when we were all young, and the energy and the excitement and enthusiasm we have for different things, and we look now and we're like, not sure I want to do that. So I think the energy among the young dentists to get into ownership is still there. I was at an event recently. There were about 70 dentists, and it had been arranged by a very experienced principal. I just wanted to share some nuggets. And most people in that room, these were 2 to 4 year qualified dentists. Most people there had an ambition to own a mum dental practice. They were excited about the opportunity to do that. So I think that there will continue to be a thriving, independently owned side of the market. The delineation tends to come around value. Once a practice gets above a value of about £2.5–3 million, it tends to be more suited to the corporate model, only because it kind of moves beyond the reach of most independent dentists to be able to afford a practice in that category. You need to make a contribution of about 10 to 15% of the overall purchase price. So sub that figure, there's lots of dentists that have that deposit. Once you go above that figure, it becomes more complicated and more tricky, and that's where the corporate market tends to come into its own. Having said that, the overwhelming majority of what we sell is to the independent market, which is really good, because it means that the team that are in place get to have a principal on site. It means that perhaps the local culture gets retained because there's a principal on site. It's not selling against the corporates. They're just different organisations, and as you said, they can work side by side.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly been my observation as well. But it's great to hear that your references to those events, for example, where there's some younger dentists who are still got that energy and that desire, because I think it's a great time to be thinking about becoming a practice owner if you aren't one already. You mentioned a few points then earlier about what makes a kind of an optimized practice, what the more successful practices are. And you mentioned two things, which was the delegation point and the importance of the team, which will go hand in hand. And I just wondered where you saw practice management fitting within those two things, the delegation and having a suitably skilled team.
I think practice management is absolutely critical, because as a principal, you're probably still doing could be up to 3.5 clinical days a week. So I always take the view that when you're locked away in your surgery seeing a patient, you're a dentist. You're not actually having any influence or impact on your business at all. You're a clinician. So if you don't have somebody who's managing the business on your behalf, when you're in the surgery, when you're not in the practice, when you're on holiday, then your business is not going to be managed and move forward. But the key thing is you need a practice manager. You need somebody with delegated authority, the skills, the tools, the trust of you to make decisions and move it forward. And what disappoints me is we still see people who have the title of practice manager, but actually there's no authority that goes with that role. And I'd urge people that if they have a practice manager or a business manager or somebody who they genuinely want to take responsibility and run the business for them, they give them the tools and the authority to do that. Because again, done well, that's good delegation, but also it frees the business owner up from doing lots of tasks that they might be doing evenings and weekends. And they could be out canoeing or playing with their kids or whatever else they've got as a hobby because they've got somebody who's doing that for them through the week.
Yeah, again, that makes perfect sense. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm still doing what I'm doing after so many years is because of how many times practice owners have said, "Thank you for saving my marriage," or "Thank you for saving my relationship with my kids," or "Thank you for," because of exactly that point, where actually they're all social time is gone because they're just so God, I remember watching my kids playing tennis on a Sunday morning, and one of the other dads was a dentist who owned a practice, and he kept getting up every 5 or 10 minutes to answer the phone on a Sunday morning. It was dreadful to see how it intruded in.
But the thing is, it pervades into every element of life. You can't be good and outstanding in one area and that not filter through. And likewise, if you're fed up or stressed in one area, that's going to filter through. So if the practice is causing you a lot of heartache and problems, you're unlikely going to be a great partner, and you're likely going to be a great parent or a great brother or a great son or daughter. But likewise, if the practice is going well, it works in reverse as well. And likewise, if you have the time to enjoy home life, that's probably going to mean you show up slightly differently in your business. So we're all joined up. It's not business and it's not life. It's just us. It's all joined up. So we need to look after ourselves in all aspects, because it certainly will impact the performance, whether that's at home or in the practice.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. One of my colleagues, the excellent Richard Collard, used to talk quite a bit about it being not work-life balance but work-life blend. It's how you bring it all together, and I agree with everything that you've just said. So I'm just wondering that if a practice owner has got good at delegating a lot of tasks to the practice manager and has given them that authority, there must be some metrics that allow the practice owner to feel a sense of control, because giving that responsibility can involve a bit of relinquishing control, but they'll want some way of assessing how well things are going. Is it your experience with all those practices that you come into contact with, or have over the years come into contact with, that sort of grasp of what's actually driving the business success or otherwise is there?
Honestly, no. I think it tends to go one of two ways. I think either people have no clue what their key performance indicators are, and for those people, fortunately, the simple economics of a dental practice work quite well. So your average dental practice at the end of the year is going to make about a 25% net profit. So just by opening the doors, treating patients, they're going to make about 25% at the end of the year. And there's a fundamental problem in that, because you can get away with not knowing that much about the performance of your business, because it kind of will just keep doing that for you. Or you go to the other end of the spectrum, where people are measuring every single metric they possibly can, which again is as bad, because if you start going down into these individual data points and you start obsessing about them, you need to look at it from kind of an overview point of view. And I'd encourage practice owners to look at the 2, 3, 4 things that really matter for them and their business. So, for example, in my business that arranges commercial finance, we have one measurement we measure, and that's how many deals we send to the bank in a given month. Because we can't control the amount of the applications that come to us, like how much people want to borrow, and we can't control the bank's approval rate, but we can control how many deals we send into the banks and the quality of our applications. So we've worked out over the years that that's the thing that we focus on. We've got some secondary things we look at as well. So within a dental practice, it might be recalls, it might be production per surgery per day, it might be an individual target per dentist, but keep it quite simple, because if it's simple and manageable, it's going to happen. and you'll start to spot the trends, and trends are really important if you're looking at performance indicators. You'll start to spot them. If you've got a report that churns out 15, 16, 20 bits of data with the best will in the world, you're not going to look at it. So think about your business and say what's really important. You know, and they can vary as well. So let's just say that this month we really want to focus on recalls. It might be that recalls is the metric we're going to obsess about this month, because if we can get the recalls working, out of that is going to flow further dentistry. But it's thinking about your business and where you're at. So rather than just going to a business book and saying, what should I be measuring? Step back and be like, okay, so what do I need to measure in my business? What's important to me, my business and my team? And then just focus on those couple of things rather than get drowned in data.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I've been guilty of that throughout my career, where
we all are.
You complain about the lack of management information, and then you get swamped by it and haven't got the time to use it. So it's I completely agree with you. So as we're coming to the end of this chat, Andy, and I'm already realizing that this was just scratching the surface really, and I feel we should do this again in the not too distant future. But what immediate recommendations would you be giving to people? What first sort of steps could they be taking if they want to start tackling some of the things you've just been highlighting?
I think they need to plan with the end in mind. So I think they need to genuinely start thinking about when they're going to exit their business, and then work backwards from there. Big life decisions take between 2 and 5 years. So if we're thinking about changing job, having a family, moving house, we think we get that decision quite quickly, but we tend not. So in my experience, if people are thinking about selling their business, quite often they chew that over for quite a while. So I think they need to be honest with themselves about when do they see themselves leaving that business. They've now got kind of a framework to work within. And from there, it's then looking at the financial results they're getting already, trying to understand the elements in that are working well and the elements that aren't working well. And you might need to work with somebody like me or somebody else to assess and analyze the financial performance of the business, but also get a benchmark of what it's worth. And then put in place an improvement plan based on where you are and how much time you've got before you're going to exit. And that improvement plan will vary practice by practice. Yeah, some people will want to reduce their clinical days. Some people just want to reduce their overall working time in the practice. Other people may not have optimized the resources in the practice. They might only be having, 9 clinical days being used across 3 surgeries per week, whereas actually it could be 18 clinical days across 3 surgeries. So, they could be open for 6 days. So it's looking at all those individual elements of the practice and saying, right, so what things are we doing well? What areas are okay? And kind of where are the red flags? What are the things we can improve? But it won't be a one size fits all, because every practice will operate differently. But also you have to lay over this, what the principal wants. Some people might not want to be working more or working harder. So you have to put in place that development plan that says, right, okay, so you want to actually do less, but we want to try and maintain the profitability. Right, so how do we do that? Simple things like lots of practice still don't have a strategy of routinely reviewing their pricing. And we see practices that perhaps haven't put pricing up for 3-4 years because they're scared. They're scared that they're gonna lose patients. And in your world, you must see this all the time. But there's some real simple, quick hits that can be had. But I urge people to think about it from their point of view, from their perspective, and do what's right for them, as opposed to just follow kind of a rule book of what you need to do.
That makes so much sense, Andy, and you're right. I see that a lot. I mean, we see people putting up plan prices, and actually the resilience of patients is pretty remarkable, to be honest with you. So I would also urge people to be a bit more confident. It needs some thought, and there are obviously extremes, but I completely agree with you. And I think that not there being a one size fits all is absolutely right. And I slightly worry when you start talking about the business of dentistry. I think there can be a school of thought that just defaults to, oh, that means how do I get more patients? When actually that might not be the problem you really need to solve. There might be other things that are more pressing than that.
Yeah. And it might not even be more money. But I think money is a very easy and quick metric to go to measure success. As I say, the average dental practice will throw off a profit of 25%, which is quite a nice number. So it's then saying, right, okay, so what is the important metric for me and my business? Because for lots of people, they are a bit stressed and they feel a bit overworked. Therefore, it might be that the process they need to go through is, how do they delegate more to their team? Are they fully optimized in terms of using digital workflows? Are they using technology to the extent they could and should be? And looking at ways of improving their practice. And in that, you might see the owner saving half a day a week, which is absolutely transformational in terms of their well-being and things they can be doing away from the business. It's enormous, but you need to go through that process, and you need to kind of start with working out what you want, and then you can build a plan forward from there.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think I'll just reiterate what I said a few minutes ago, which is I have the feeling this is just Andy Acton part one, because I feel like we could do a lot more of this. But for now, thank you so much for your time and your insights, Andy. It's been very interesting and very useful, and I look forward to sort of extending the discussion a bit further, maybe later on in the year. But thank you very much.
Cheers, Nigel. Really good.
Cheers, Andy.
Cheers.